The last customer on Friday night. My name is Ryan, and this happened when I was 19, during my first year of community college. At the time, I worked part-time at a small grocery store about 15 minutes from my house. It wasn't one of those giant supermarkets. It was an older neighborhood store with maybe 12 aisles, one pharmacy counter, and 4 regular checkout lanes. I usually worked afternoons, but every few weeks I got stuck with the Friday closing shift. I hated closing on Fridays. Not because the store was busy. Actually, the opposite was true. By around 9:30, the place usually emptied out. Families had already bought whatever they needed for the weekend, and most people my age were at parties, football games, restaurants, or anywhere other than a grocery store. The store closed at 11. By 10:30, there were normally only 3 employees left. Me, whoever was supervising, and one person finishing cleanup. The night this happened was in October. It had been raining on and off since late afternoon, and by the time my shift started, the parking lot was almost completely dark, except for the lights attached to the building. I remember wishing I had called out. A bunch of my friends were hanging out at someone's house, and they kept sending pictures into our group chat while I was stocking bottled drinks near the registers. My supervisor that night was a woman named Cheryl. She was probably in her 50s and had worked there longer than I had been alive. The other employee was Jamal, a guy from my college who worked in produce. At around 10:15, Cheryl told me to start collecting the baskets from around the store. I walked through each aisle, straightening things and picking up whatever customers had abandoned. Nothing unusual happened until I got to the cereal aisle. There was a man standing near the far end. I hadn't noticed him come inside. He looked somewhere in his 40s. He was tall, thin, and wearing a dark rain jacket. His hair was wet, and he didn't have a basket or cart. He was just standing there, staring at the shelves. I said, "How's it going?" He looked at me. He didn't answer. I assumed he didn't hear me or didn't feel like talking, so I continued walking. About 5 minutes later, I saw him again near the dairy section. Still no cart, still nothing in his hands. He wasn't looking at any products this time. He was watching me. When I noticed, he turned toward the refrigerators. It made me uncomfortable, but grocery stores get strange people all the time. Anyone who has worked retail knows what I mean. I went back toward the registers. I asked Cheryl if she knew the guy in the black jacket. She looked toward the aisle and said, "What guy?" When we looked again, he was gone. I told her he'd been walking around without buying anything. She shrugged and said, "As long as he's out by 11. At 10:40, Cheryl made the closing announcement. The store was almost empty. There was an older woman checking out at register 2 and another customer near the frozen foods. At around 10:50, Jamal came up front and asked whether he could leave a little early because his girlfriend was waiting outside. Cheryl agreed. That left just the 2 of us. I locked one side of the automatic entrance doors while Cheryl counted the register. At 10:58, the last customer came up front. It was the man. He placed one item on the conveyor belt, a roll of duct tape. That was it. I remember noticing it because after walking around the store for nearly 45 minutes, that was all he bought. I scanned it. He stared at my name tag. "Ryan," he said. It was the first time I heard his voice. I said, "Yeah." He asked, "You closing tonight?" The question caught me off guard. I gave him a vague answer. "Pretty much." He smiled slightly. Then he asked, "You walk home?" I said no. I don't know why I answered at all. Maybe because when you work retail, you get used to customers asking meaningless questions. I told him I drove. He nodded. Then he looked through the front windows at the parking lot. "What do you drive?" That was when I stopped being polite. I said, "Have a good night." He stared at me for another second. Then he took the duct tape and left. I watched him cross the parking lot. He disappeared into the darkness, near the far side of the building. I couldn't tell which car belonged to him. At 11, Cheryl locked the front doors. I told her what he had asked. This time she took it more seriously. She looked through the glass but didn't see anyone. We still had about 20 minutes of closing work. I emptied trash while Cheryl finished the registers. I kept checking the windows every time I passed the front of the store. Nothing. At 11:25, we were ready to leave. Cheryl parked near the front entrance. My car was farther down the lot, maybe 60 yards away. She told me she would drive me over to it. I almost laughed because it felt unnecessary. Then we stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was wet and everything beyond the store lights looked black. Cheryl unlocked her car. I was about to get in when I saw something near mine. A person was standing beside it. I froze. Cheryl asked what was wrong. I pointed. The person moved behind my car. We immediately went back inside and locked the door. Cheryl called 911. We stood near the customer service counter watching the parking lot. For maybe 2 minutes, nothing moved. Then the man from earlier stepped into the light. He was walking toward the store. Slowly, he reached the front doors and tried them. Locked. He looked through the glass, then he raised one hand and knocked. Cheryl yelled, "We're closed." He ignored her. He looked directly at me. Then he held up my license plate. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. Then I realized he had removed the rear license plate from my car. He tapped it against the glass. Once, twice. Then he smiled. I backed away. Cheryl told him police were coming. His expression changed immediately. He dropped the plate and walked quickly toward the side of the building. Police arrived less than 5 minutes later. 2 officers checked around the store while another stayed with us. They found my car unlocked. I knew I had locked it before work. The rear plate was missing, obviously, and the driver's door had scratches around the lock. Inside, the glove compartment was open. Nothing expensive seemed to be missing. Then one officer looked in the back seat and told us not to touch anything. There was a black backpack on the floor. It wasn't mine. Inside were gloves, a screwdriver, zip ties, another roll of duct tape, and a folding knife. There was also a small notebook. One page had descriptions of vehicles, another had names. Some names belonged to employees at our store. Mine was there. Beside my name it said, "Friday close, silver Honda, usually alone." I felt sick reading it. Police searched the surrounding area but didn't catch him that night. The store gave them security footage. The cameras showed something none of us had noticed. The man had entered the store before my shift even started. He walked around for almost 2 hours. Several times he stood near the front windows watching employees arrive. He apparently left once, walked through the parking lot, then came back inside. One camera showed him near my car. Police identified him about 3 days later. His name was Franklin Reeves. He had prior convictions for burglary and stalking. More disturbingly, police believed he had been watching several late-night businesses in the area. He specifically looked for young employees leaving after closing. He had been seen near a pharmacy and 2 restaurants on previous Friday nights. They arrested him after an employee at another store recognized his picture and called police when he appeared in their parking lot. He eventually pleaded guilty to burglary-related charges, stalking, vehicle tampering, and possession of criminal tools. He received prison time. The grocery store changed its closing procedures afterward. Nobody was allowed to walk to their car alone after dark. Employees parked near the front entrance, and a manager had to watch until everyone drove away. I quit a few months later. I still think about that Friday sometimes. The part that bothers me isn't that he stood outside the locked store. It's knowing he had been there before I even arrived. While I spent the entire shift thinking I was just working a boring Friday night, someone else had already learned my schedule, found my car, and decided I was the person he wanted to wait for. Ever since then, I pay attention when I leave work late. If the same car is parked too long, I notice. If someone asks what I drive, I don't answer. And I never assume someone wandering around a store is actually shopping, because sometimes the last customer of the night isn't waiting for the store to close. The Friday night house party. My name is Lauren, and this happened when I was 20. It was a Friday night near the end of my sophomore year of college. One of my friends, Ashley, invited me to a party at a house a few miles off campus. I knew the guy who lived there through mutual friends, but I had never been to his house before. I almost stayed home. I had worked earlier that day, I was tired, and I had an exam coming up Monday. Ashley talked me into going. She said we would stay for an hour. Anyone who has ever gone to a college party knows that 1 hour usually means nothing. We arrived around 10:30. The house was in an older neighborhood with narrow streets and cars parked on both sides. It was a 2-story rental with a small front porch and a fenced backyard. There were probably 40 people there. Music was playing downstairs. People were standing in the kitchen holding plastic cups, and groups kept moving between the living room and backyard. At first, I had a good time. Ashley knew more people than I did, so I mostly stayed near her. Around 11:30, I noticed a man standing near the kitchen doorway. He looked older than everyone else. Not old exactly, but probably early 30s. Most people at the party were 18 to 22. He wore jeans, a black jacket, and a baseball cap. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just watching. I assumed he was somebody's older brother. A little later, I went upstairs to use the bathroom. The upstairs hallway was quieter. There were 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a staircase leading back down. As I came out of the bathroom, the man from downstairs was standing at the end of the hallway. I stopped. He smiled and said, "Sorry, looking for the bathroom." I pointed behind me. He thanked me, but instead of going toward the bathroom, he asked, "You here with somebody?" I said yes. He asked who. I told him my boyfriend was downstairs. I didn't have a boyfriend. He nodded. Then he walked past me. I went downstairs immediately. I found Ashley and told her there was an older guy upstairs asking questions. She asked what he looked like. I pointed toward the kitchen. He wasn't there anymore. Ashley said she didn't know him. We found the guy hosting the party, Nate. Nate didn't recognize the description either. He said people had brought friends of friends, so he wasn't too concerned, but promised to keep an eye out. Around midnight, Ashley wanted to leave. That was fine with me. We grabbed our jackets and walked outside. Her car was parked about a block away. The street was quieter than when we arrived. Most nearby houses had their lights off, and the party music became muffled once the front door shut behind us. Halfway to the car, I heard the party door open again. I looked back. The man in the baseball cap stepped outside. He stood on the porch. I told Ashley. She looked back too. We kept walking. The man came down the porch steps. He started walking in our direction. Ashley whispered, "Get in the car." So did he. We reached Ashley's car and got inside. She locked the doors immediately. The man was still maybe 50 yards away. Instead of approaching the car, he stopped under a streetlight. He just watched us. Ashley started the engine. We pulled away. At the next intersection, I looked back. The man was gone. We both agreed it was creepy, but once we were driving, the fear faded. Ashley dropped me off at my apartment around 12:30. My roommate was staying at her boyfriend's place, so I was alone. I locked the door, changed into pajamas, and got into bed. About 20 minutes later, I received a follow request on Instagram. The account belonged to someone named Mike R. The profile picture was the man from the party. I stared at it. I had never told him my name. My Instagram did not use my full name, but my profile picture clearly showed me. I declined the request. A message arrived. "Why did you leave so early?" I blocked him. 5 minutes later, another account messaged me. This one had no profile picture. "Your boyfriend didn't come home with you." That scared me. I had told him upstairs that my boyfriend was downstairs. He knew I lied. More importantly, he knew I had gone home alone. I called Ashley. She answered immediately. I asked whether she noticed anyone following us. She said no. Then she went quiet. She told me that after dropping me off, she noticed a dark SUV behind her for several turns. She assumed it was coincidence. When she pulled into her own apartment complex, the SUV continued straight. We both agreed to call Nate. Nate answered and said he had kicked the man out of the party shortly after we left. Apparently, another girl complained that he had been upstairs opening bedroom doors. Nate asked who invited him. Nobody knew. That made everything worse. I called the police non-emergency number and explained the messages. An officer told me to lock my doors and contact them immediately if anyone appeared outside. I left every light off and watched through the blinds. Nothing happened for almost an hour. At around 2, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 quiet knocks. I froze. Nobody I knew would randomly come over at 2 in the morning. Then my phone buzzed. A new Instagram account sent, "Open the door." I called 911. The dispatcher told me to move away from the entrance and lock myself in a bedroom. I did. Another knock. Then I heard the door handle move. Once, twice. The man outside said my name, Lauren. He said it quietly. Then, "I just want to talk." I didn't respond. My apartment was on the 2nd floor. From my bedroom window, I could see part of the parking lot. I carefully looked through the blinds. A dark SUV was parked near the far end. Its lights were off. The man knocked harder. Then I heard metal scraping near the door lock. I told the dispatcher he was trying to get inside. She said officers were almost there. The scraping stopped. There was silence. Then footsteps moved quickly down the exterior staircase. Police arrived less than a minute later. 1 cruiser entered from each side of the complex. The dark SUV attempted to leave through the back entrance. An officer stopped it. The driver was the same man. His name was Michael Brenner. He was 32. Police found a screwdriver, gloves, pepper spray, duct tape, and several women's IDs inside the SUV. None of the IDs belonged to me. Detectives later learned that Michael had been entering college parties around the area without being invited. He targeted houses where large numbers of people came and went because nobody questioned unfamiliar faces. He would talk to women, learn names, watch who they arrived with, and sometimes follow them when they left. Investigators connected him to 2 earlier stalking complaints and 1 attempted apartment break-in. They believed he found my Instagram through the party. I had been tagged in a photo that Ashley posted earlier that evening. My apartment building was visible in several old pictures on my profile, including one where the complex sign appeared behind me. He pieced the rest together. Michael was charged with stalking, attempted burglary, possession of burglary tools, and several offenses connected to the IDs found in his vehicle. He eventually went to prison. I stopped going to house parties for a long time afterward. What bothered me most was how easily he blended in. There was no gate, no guest list, no one checking names. 40 people were inside that house, and everyone assumed the unfamiliar guy belonged to somebody else. That was all he needed. I still go out on Friday nights. But if I'm at a party and someone seems completely disconnected from everyone else, I pay attention. And I never post where I am while I'm still there. Because Michael didn't need to know me. He only needed a crowded house, 1 public Instagram account, and enough time to watch me leave. The last showing. My name is Ethan, and this happened when I was 21. A few friends and I had a habit of going to late movies on Friday nights. We liked the final showing because theaters were usually quieter and tickets were cheaper where we lived. One Friday in January, my friend Ben canceled at the last minute. The other 2 people we invited canceled too. I already bought my ticket online, so I decided to go alone. The movie started at 10:45. It was almost 2.5 hours long. The theater was attached to an outdoor shopping center. Most of the surrounding stores closed by 10, which meant the entire area became strangely empty by the time late movies ended. I parked near a side entrance. There were maybe 15 cars in that section. Inside, the theater was still relatively busy. People were leaving earlier showings, employees were cleaning, and the concession stand was open. My auditorium was almost empty. There were only 6 other people. A couple sat near the front. 2 guys were several rows behind me, and 1 man sat alone near the back corner. I noticed him because he entered about 10 minutes after the movie started. Instead of choosing one of the dozens of empty seats, he sat directly behind me. Not 1 row behind, the exact seat behind mine. I could hear him breathing occasionally. After maybe 20 minutes he moved. He sat 2 seats to my right in the same row. That bothered me. I looked toward him. He was probably late 30s or early 40s. He wore a heavy dark jacket and baseball cap. He was not watching the movie. He was looking at me. When our eyes met, he turned toward the screen. I told myself he was strange, nothing more. Halfway through the movie, I went to the bathroom. When I came out, he was standing near the hallway. He wasn't using the restroom. He was waiting. He said, "Good movie?" I answered, "Yeah." He asked, "You here alone?" I said my friends were inside. He smiled, didn't look like it. I went back to the auditorium. Instead of returning to my original seat, I sat near the couple at the front. The man returned a minute later. He sat in the back. I could feel him watching me. By the time the movie ended, it was around 1:15 in the morning. The lights came up. I waited for the couple to leave, then walked out behind them. The man remained seated. That gave me some relief. The theater lobby was almost empty. 1 employee swept near the concession stand. I walked through the side doors toward the parking lot. It was freezing outside. Most of the shopping center was dark. I reached my car and heard footsteps behind me. I turned. The man from the movie had exited the theater. He was walking toward me. I unlocked my car and got inside. Before I could start the engine, he reached the passenger side. He tried the handle. Locked. He knocked on the window. I stared at him. He said something, but the glass muffled it. I shook my head. He pointed toward the rear of my car. Then he made a motion like something was wrong with the tire. I didn't believe him. I started the engine. I drove toward the exit. A dark pickup truck pulled out from another row. It followed me. At first, I didn't know whether the man was driving it. Then the truck came close enough that I saw the same baseball cap. I called 911. The dispatcher told me not to drive home. She gave me directions toward a 24-hour police substation about 10 minutes away. The truck followed. I changed lanes. It changed lanes. I turned into a gas station. The truck stopped along the road. I remained inside my car. The truck eventually drove past. I waited. About a minute later, it reappeared from the opposite direction. That removed any doubt. I drove away. The truck accelerated behind me. At one point, it pulled beside me. The man lowered his window and yelled that something was wrong with my car. I ignored him. He fell behind. Then he struck my rear bumper. Not hard enough to spin me out, just enough to make me stop. I didn't. The dispatcher told me officers were approaching. The truck hit me again. A police cruiser appeared at the next intersection. The truck immediately turned onto a side street. Another cruiser followed. I continued to the substation. Police caught him about 10 minutes later. His name was Robert Myers. Inside his pickup, officers found multiple license plates, tools, gloves, restraints, and property belonging to several people. My rear tire had also been partially deflated. Investigators reviewed theater security footage. Robert had followed me into the bathroom hallway. While I was inside, he left the building briefly and returned. Police believe that was when he tampered with my tire. His plan was apparently to follow me until the tire lost enough air that I pulled over. Detectives connected him to several roadside robberies. He targeted people leaving entertainment venues late at night. Movie theaters, bars, bowling alleys, places where people emerged tired, distracted, and sometimes alone. He would damage a tire or vehicle, follow the driver, then approach when they stopped. In 2 earlier incidents, victims reported being robbed at knife point. Robert was charged with stalking, assault with a vehicle, attempted robbery, vehicle tampering, and offenses related to previous cases. He eventually received a prison sentence. I still go to movies, but I almost never attend the final showing alone anymore. If I do, I park near the entrance. I also check my tires before leaving. The thing that unsettles me most is how ordinary the entire night felt until the theater emptied. During the movie, there were employees around, other customers, security cameras, lights. Robert waited until all of that was behind me. He didn't want to do anything inside the theater. The theater was just where he picked me. The real plan began once I walked into the parking lot, believing the night was over. The Friday night delivery. My name is Natalie, and this happened when I was 22. At the time, I delivered food for extra money on weekends. Friday nights were usually the best. Between 6 and midnight, I could make more than I did during an entire weekday shift. Most deliveries were completely uneventful. Pick up food, follow GPS, drop it at a door, take a picture, leave. The order that made me quit came in a little after 11:30 on a Friday night. I was planning to stop for the night, but the app offered me almost $30 for one delivery. The restaurant was nearby. The customer lived about 12 miles away. I accepted. The order was from a 24-hour diner. 2 burgers, fries, drinks, and dessert. Nothing unusual. The delivery address was outside town. The GPS took me away from the main roads and onto a narrow 2-lane road surrounded by woods. I remember thinking I should have declined, but I was already halfway there. The last road was gravel. There were only a few houses, each separated by large wooded lots. The address belonged to a small house set far back from the road. No porch light was on. The delivery instructions said, "Leave at side door. Do not knock." I parked near the driveway. Before getting out, I messaged the customer. I said I had arrived and asked if they wanted the food by the side door. No response. I took the bag and walked toward the house. The side door was around the right side. As I approached, I noticed all the windows were dark. I set the food down, took the delivery picture, and walked back toward my car. Before I reached it, my phone buzzed. The customer sent, "Wrong door." I looked back. There were only 2 doors, front and side. I replied, "Which door?" The response, "Back." I didn't want to walk behind the house. Something felt wrong. I told them the food was at the side door and completed the delivery. Immediately another message appeared. Bring it to the back. I ignored it. I got into my car and locked the doors, then headlights turned on behind me. A truck was parked farther down the property, partially hidden beside a detached garage. I hadn't seen it because it was dark. The engine started. The truck moved toward the driveway. I pulled away. The truck followed me onto the gravel road. Maybe it belonged to the customer, maybe they were leaving, I didn't know. I drove faster, so did the truck. When I reached the paved road, it remained behind me. I made an unnecessary right turn. The truck followed. I called my boyfriend and told him what was happening. He told me to call 911. I was still hesitating. Then the delivery customer sent another message. Why are you leaving? I called 911. The dispatcher told me not to drive home. She asked for the road name and vehicle description. The truck came closer. Its high beams flashed repeatedly. I could barely see. I accelerated. The truck stayed directly behind me. Then my phone buzzed again. You forgot something. The dispatcher directed me toward a gas station near the highway where an officer would meet me. The truck followed for nearly 8 miles. As we approached the gas station, it suddenly turned onto another road. Police arrived shortly afterward. I showed the officer the delivery messages. We contacted the delivery service. The account had been created only hours earlier using a prepaid card. The address belonged to an empty rental property. Nobody officially lived there. Police went to the house. The food was still sitting beside the side door. Behind the house, they found something that made the entire situation much more disturbing. A folding chair was positioned near the back door. Beside it were gloves, zip ties, and a flashlight. There were footprints in the mud, leading from the detached garage toward the back of the house. The truck was located the next afternoon. A deputy recognized it parked outside a motel. The driver was a 30-year-old man named Anthony Caldwell. Police found several delivery service accounts on his phone. They also found screenshots containing names and profile pictures of female delivery drivers. The apps displayed drivers' first names and photographs after an order was accepted. Investigators believed Anthony created orders late on Friday and Saturday nights, waited to see who accepted them, and canceled if the driver was male. If a woman accepted, he allowed the order to continue. Police connected him to at least 3 earlier reports from drivers who said customers behaved strangely at isolated properties. One woman reported someone trying to open her car door. Another said a man asked her to bring food inside, even though the instructions originally said to leave it outside. Nobody connected the incidents until my report. Anthony had used multiple accounts and different addresses. Detectives believed the instruction telling me to leave the food at the back door was intended to get me out of sight of the road. The truck was hidden by the garage. From where I initially parked, I never saw anyone. If I had carried the food around the back of the house like he asked, I would have walked directly toward where police found the chair and restraints. Anthony was charged with stalking, attempted kidnapping-related offenses, harassment, and several other crimes. The delivery company permanently banned the accounts associated with him and provided records to investigators. He eventually pleaded guilty and received prison time. I stopped delivering food after that. I know millions of deliveries happen safely every night, but I couldn't do it anymore. Friday nights had always been my favorite shifts because the money was good and there were plenty of orders. After that night, all I could think about was how much information a customer received before I arrived. My first name, my picture, my approximate location, my car approaching on a map. Anthony didn't randomly choose me on that gravel road. He ordered food and waited for the app to bring someone to him. And if I had followed one more instruction and carried that bag behind the house, the last thing anyone would have seen was a delivery marked completed at 11:47 on a Friday night.